All right. Well, good morning again. Welcome to Summertime at Crossway. I'm so glad you're here. You're probably wondering what these people are doing on stage with me. So let me just take a moment and explain. Many of you know that a couple weeks ago, there was a group of 13 people from our church that went on a missions trip to Orizaba, Mexico. And some of the people, these folks who are joining me on stage are some of the people that went on that trip with me. This is Jackson. You're used to seeing him. He plays on the praise team. This is Chuck. You're probably not used to seeing him. This is Chad and Alicia. They're married. And you're probably not used to seeing them, or maybe you are. I don't know. But they all went on the trip with us. And rather than me standing up and kind of talking about the trip, I wanted for you guys to actually hear about the trip from them and from their perspective and kind of what happened and all that kind of stuff. Now, before I start asking them some questions so they can tell you about their trip, I want to report back to you. When we went on this trip, you guys gave us about $7,000, a little over $7,000 to use to bless this church, La Fe, that we partner with there. And I wanted to tell you about how some of the ways that we used that money. One of the things that we did with that money was we purchased some speakers for this church. They had some serious sound issues in their church, and the way that it was set up in their church before we got there is if you sat in the front of the building, it was too loud. If you sat in the back of the building or towards the back because you felt like the front was too loud, it was too quiet back there. And so they had constant sound issues for people no matter where they sat. So we purchased some brand new speakers and we put them up and we set it up so that there's consistent sound in their room. We also used some of that money to purchase some wireless speakers, microphones for them. We used the money to fix some networking issues and some wiring issues for them. They have a feeding center in their church, and we used some of that money to have a custom table built for them so they can be more efficient and effective and things can be more sanitary for them as they cook. We also used some of that money to purchase gifts that we took when we did home visits. While we were there, we went to different people's homes who invited us in, and we spent some time with them. And when we went, we took gifts, things that you and I generally take for granted. We had towels and dishes and Oreo cookies and things like that. But we used some of that money to give them those gifts, and it was a huge blessing to them. And of course, there were a whole bunch of other ways. But I tell you all that to say thank you so much for your generosity and partnering with us as we went. That was a huge deal. So let me just kind of get into some of the questioning here. I guess the first question I'd like to ask you guys is, what made you sign up for the trip in the first place?
I'll take this. Besides the obvious, my mom made me sign up. And it's just, a lot of other countries, Mexico, anywhere in the world, they're portrayed as different than us. And for me, I wanted to go and find out for myself, are they really that different from us? And from my experience, they really are not. They're not really different at all.
Yeah. Chuck, why'd you sign up for this trip?
Well, for years, my wife and I, we'd been doing our own careers, doing different directions and all that. And as we're getting older, part of the church, guidelines we have is one of them is do it life together. So we decided, in our mid-years, let's say.
Mid-years, that's cute that you think that.
We're doing life together. And that's one of the things we wanted to do, was serve together. But it also happened to be her birthday, and that's how she wanted to spend her birthday, was serving.
Yeah.
And there she is, celebrating her birthday.
Yeah, so on the pictures behind us, the church that we went to be a part of, to bless them, they found out that it was Dean's birthday. And your birthday was on Friday, right?
Yeah.
It was on a Friday. And so what they did was they made a cake and got presents together. And Dean didn't know about any of this until we all showed up for lunch and they came out and we sang happy birthday to her. A really special moment. But just a really, really thoughtful group of people. So that's what you're seeing on the pictures behind us. Yeah. How about you, Alicia?
So we had signed up to go pre-COVID. We were all going to go. And then, of course, that got canceled. And so when it came up again, there was no hesitation. It was like, oh, our trip's back on. Let's go.
Yeah.
And, of course, there's all these things that, finances, time, we're all so busy and things like that. But that just instant yes made you figure out the rest. And so I think for us, it's just kind of an innate feeling to want to go and serve.
Sure. Chad, anything to add to that?
She told me to.
Yeah. So your mom and your wife, huh? Gotcha.
So yeah, it's something that I'd always wanted to do. She got to go in college, high school time frame. Her mother goes on a lot of mission trips, and something I always wanted to do. And we're really excited about that COVID year that we didn't get to go. So when this one came up, we signed up. Of course, with the money situation, you're always saying what I can do with all that money, but or the money that you're going to spend for this trip.
Yeah.
But I was so glad that, we went. So it was really good.
One of the things that's kind of interesting about Chad and Alicia's story is he talks about finances. They kind of had a decision to make. Do we go on family vacation or do we go on this missions trip? And they decided to go on the missions trip instead of spend that money to go on a family vacation, which I think says a lot about them and their priorities and personally their character. So, or really Alicia's character.
Mostly the accountant.
So can you guys share, because we did a lot of stuff while we were there, and I want to give everybody kind of an idea of the type of stuff that we did and some of the stuff that happened. So can you guys share about some of the things that you did while you were there?
Well, whenever I was just, there, I would help a little bit with the tech stuff. It's not my strong suit. I would just kind of come up with a little suggestion like, this might be a better place for the speakers. But mostly whenever I was there were two of the pastor's kids, Miguel and Median. They would be in there and their parents are busy and they can't really watch after their kids. And, it's a 3-year-old girl and a, maybe 6-year-old boy. So, somebody has to watch them or, it's a 3-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl. And so I would watch them and make sure, they didn't get any trouble. And there were also some kids that, would come every day and play soccer and basketball in the courtyard that they had. And I would just kind of play with them, make sure they were having a good time. And I would help with the feeding center a little bit. That would be about it. I also played guitar on Sunday at their church, even though I was talking to one of their pastors, Pepe. He was like, I'll play with you on Sunday. And I was like, no, I'm doing this so you don't have to worry about anything on Sunday. And, you can have a Sunday off. And he was like, no, I'll play with you. So I just stopped arguing with him. No point.
Yeah. Yeah. Chuck, what are some of the things you did while you were there?
We had an opportunity. They had some needs for some wiring issues they had, and to be able to clean some of that up, and then also to be able to, they had some cameras they were having issues with that we were able to change some power supplies out to fix some of the problems they had there. Chad jumped in there, man. He did an awesome job in there on the kitchen. They had the kitchen they had, and they'll show some pictures later, I think, of the kitchen. It was small. It was so hot in there. They had no exhaust and everything. Chad came up and got the fan inserted in there and got some exhaust going and able to cool it down and also get some of the fumes out of there as well. We're all part of these little tasks that all came together. We're great. We also had a chance that I didn't mention earlier that to go on these home visits.
Yeah.
And they were so impactful to each and every one of us that were able to go on those home visits to meet the people that are in need. And to have the homes that are inside of our living rooms or even our kitchens maybe.
Yeah.
And to be able to go and visit these people, like you said, take them the goods that we're able to purchase and all that stuff. And just they were so in awe of somebody traveling that far to come see them.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this one particular, if you guys remember, there's one particular home visit that we went to. I felt like all of them were very, by the way, home visits may sound strange to American ears, but to people where we were at, it was a huge honor for them to think that we would come from America and we would want to come to their house and meet them and talk to them. I think at one point, Alicia and I were talking about how, man, I can't imagine what it would be like to be there and have, 13 people that you don't know all crowding into your home that basically is the size of most of our living rooms. But for them, they think about it very differently. And there was this one home we went to where there's this woman who probably wasn't even over 5 foot. Her name was Andy, and she shared this story about how 3 or 4 years prior she had given her life to Christ, and she told us about all the things leading up to it. And then she told us about all the persecution that she endured because she gave her life to Jesus Christ. I mean, in America, we sometimes get concerned about it. If I speak about religious things, or somebody going to say something ugly to me? But for them, I mean, you can be ostracized from your community. Your family will cut you off. You can lose your job. You can lose your home. You can lose everything. And so she was talking about all this, and man, it was just one of the most incredible things, because she talked about how in the middle of it, she kept asking God, I mean, like, God, why is this happening to me? I've given my life to you. I'm following you. Why is all this difficult stuff happening to me? But she talked for a long time about how she clung to her faith and how God has seen her through all of that. Kind of a funny moment on the end of it, because it was such a powerful thing. Like, we asked her if we could pray with her about something, and she gave some prayer requests, and it came time to pray, and everybody's kind of looking around the room, and I was like, hey, Chad, you want to pray? And Chad's like tears running down his face. He's like, oh, I can't do it.
I had a lot going on inside at that moment, and I'm looking at him, and he's like, what, bro? Pray.
Yeah. So then we got outside of the thing, and I harassed him. I was like, what are you sissying out for, man? Like, what's up with that? So at the next home visit, he manned up and prayed. So, well.
And the one after that, he just like called on me every time.
Yeah, the whole trip.
It was like
the whole trip from then on out, anytime it's time to pray, I'm like, Chad wants to pray. It was awesome. Alicia, tell about some of the things that you were involved in.
Okay, so Kelly, Dean, and I, we were kind of on the kitchen project, and so we went in there, got to know Carlita, and just figure out what it was she thought she needed. And one of the big projects you can see back here, this is what they started with on the left-hand side, was this just center table that they kind of use for everything, a cutting board, just store things to serve food. And so she really wanted that redone. And so, we went through this whole thing. Okay, how can we do that best? That weird shelf right there, she's about my height. We're a little vertically challenged. So she couldn't see over that. So that was kind of an issue for her. And so finally, at the end of the day, instead of us rigging something or trying to, manually fix this, we were able to get the table on the right, and they were just so overjoyed by that. So.
Yeah, they were. And just for context, Carlita is the one who oversees their feeding center that operates out of their church. And this may not seem like a big deal to you, but it was a huge deal to them. In fact, they spend so much time in that feeding center working to feed kids. And by the way, they have 2 days a week they feed kids. One on Wednesday, one on Friday. They feed about 70 to 75 kids both of those days. Our church pays for one of those days in its entirety. Every week, there will be 70 to 75 kids who get to eat because of Crossway's generosity. Well, really because of your generosity. You should know that. Also, there's a part-time employee that helps shop and do things like that that's also being paid because of what our church gives to this church to help them do this. But this is a big deal. Really, it is. It may not look like much to you, but it was such a big deal that when we finally had it delivered, the pastor's wife literally wept. I mean, this was going to revolutionize what they did and how they did it. So, kind of neat story there. Mm-hmm. Chad, did you do anything?
So I consider myself a redneck electrician, but the Mexican people down there are PhDs in this. So we spent a lot of the time with Chuck fixing some fire hazards, I will just say.
Yeah.
And but it was really a gret opportunity to just serve, and I learned a lot from Chuck, and Alicia and I got to work together. We try to limit that because
I had to separate you guys a couple times.
Yeah, a couple times,
Yeah.
but enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was good. So one of the things I love about these type of trips is, although there are definitely challenges, and we faced our fair share of challenges, there are also things about it that make it so rewarding. And every single time that I've ever been on one of these trips, God teaches everybody something. So can you guys share for just a minute, maybe something about the trip that was rewarding or a lesson that God taught you?
Yeah, I'll take that one. On the way down there, as soon as you get to Mexico, it's not what we're used to. It's a poverty-stricken country. As me being an engineer, I'm looking at all the structures and finding all the little issues with everything. And I really got a sense of these people need us. They need us to come down here and help. And, throughout the week, it really changed because I saw how the people valued what we were doing, and I just gained so much more from them. And something that God taught me was, you spoke weeks ago about idols, and idols being anything that gets in the way with us and God. And I think here we really take things for granted. I mean, these people had nothing, and they were so faithful and understood so much about God, where I get caught up in vacations and this truck and, all the things, the job, the promotions. So it really kind of reset my thinking on that.
Yep.
And
Yeah, I think it did that for probably all of us, I'd imagine. Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in there?
Whenever I would think about it, I've thought about this for a little bit after the trip, during the trip, and I thought about one verse, Leviticus 19:18. Love thy neighbor. I think we all know it by the King James Version. It's like their community and their family. It's a lot of what they're concerned about, and what they really, really care about is their family and their community, and not just the community in the church, it's their whole community. And it just stuck out to me that, if they had the resources, I feel like they would have that kitchen open every day of the week. It wouldn't just be 2 days. And it just really stuck out to me, because I know for me, and I know for a few other people in this church, it's, whenever we serve, it can be, I know there's a lot of volunteers here. They're volunteering right now, and I'm really thankful for that. I volunteer every once in a while myself. But for some of us, including me, it's, we have Serve Sunday, and that might be your one day of the year. And, there's a camp called SOS for kids, and that might be their 1 week of the year. And it's just, I think, as a church and as me, myself, it really opened my eyes that, I can do better, and I feel like some of us can do better, that we should try and serve as much as we can, because we're very, very fortunate with the resources that we have, that we can serve as many times as we want. And, we don't have to wonder if, can we only do this a certain number of times? And I think that's what I got really out of the mission trip for myself.
Yeah. How about you, Alicia?
I think for me, we were able to, one of the days we went to a park, and they would drive around in this little car with the radio, right? They had like a boom box, and it's almost like an ice cream truck, right? Going around the neighborhood. So that way the kids knew to come to this park. Essentially, it was a big field that you can see back there. And so they would show up, and I was asked to talk to the kids. So I was like, oh, yeah, sure, I can talk to the kids. And that was stretching me a little bit. But we get there, and they're like, okay, Alicia, you're up. And not only was it kids, which I was thinking, hey, kids, let's talk in this little circle. It was the community. It was all the other volunteers. It was everybody staring. And then I started really doubting, oh, gosh, is what I prepared a little bit going to be good enough, and then also have to do it through a translator, which is very strange, because you get on a roll and then you have to stop. You lose your train of thought. It's terrible. But at the end of the day, I think for me, it was saying yes, even though I felt very, very out of place and uncomfortable, because the joy that you get from that on the backside is just something that's almost indescribable. And so saying those little yeses, even though I've just kind of started, yeah, sure, and then I'll figure it out later, just because I know that in the long run, that's what God's asking you to do.
Yeah, the funny thing about that whole incident for you was I was sitting there with Kelly when she asked you to do that. We were sitting there at a table talking about some, church stuff we had to handle. And then she calls you over, and you come over, and I think she asked you to do that 30 minutes before. And you so quickly said yes. I was like, wow, that's super confident.
I'm dying inside.
I'm telling you, she looked so confident. I was like, you go, girl, And then you got out there and did the thing. And Kelly said it was amazing. But I really wondered if you understood what you were committing to when you said yes.
I did not.
Yeah, it was a kind of funny moment. What about you, Chuck?
Well, while we were working in the church there, we were pulling wire. We were tying things up and trying to make things, better. And that's what or at least for me, it was in my head. I was there to work and do things like that. And as we were going along doing that, me and Chad and Mike, we were doing these things, start to look down and I see the volunteers that they have at the church. And I see, like Jackson was saying, I see these people that aren't on a list to be signed up, for this thing. They don't be voluntold.
Right.
They're there out of a calling that God's put on their heart to be there, even if they don't have anything that they have to do at that moment. And that kind of turned the tide for me. It's like, wait, now these people are taking ownership, and they're willing to sit here and wait for anything that needs to be done, even if they don't know anything that needs to be done. So at that point, we kind of said, okay, we're going to have them start doing these things and all that stuff. And at that point, it was, hey, God is speaking to us and telling us, hey, that you're here to get blessed by them.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing, and to teach us that you're not really here to go do all this work. You're there to make these relationships and to be blessed by God.
Yeah. The thing that one of the things that kind of stood out to me is very similar to what stood out to you, and that is just how serious their church takes
Definitely.
building the kingdom of God. They are serious about it. There's a church about 30 to 45 minutes away from Lafay in Orizaba, in a city called Tequila. Now, I know that brings up a whole bunch of mental images for you. None of them are accurate, just so you know. But there's a church that's there that's kind of a church plant because this church, Lafay, is so serious about the gospel and spreading the gospel and doing God's work in the world. And when you go to Lafay, the church at Lafay is just nothing short of incredible. In fact, Andy, the girl that we talked about earlier, is actually a part of that church in Tequila. It's just incredible what God's doing in Tequila. There's also another church. Like while we were there, they kept other pastors from the community would come and find us, and they would want to meet us. And I thought that was kind of strange, because they'd come in and they go, hey, I'm so-and-so, and I pastor this church somewhere else in the community and all this kind of stuff. And they bring in people from their church and introduce us. And I didn't really quite understand why it was happening at first until I found out that basically their church is financially also trying to help out and support these other churches in their community. And the pastor there, Paco, actually told me about several of them. He said, listen, when Crossway gives to us, part of what we get from Crossway, we give to them. Mm-hmm. And they're just building the kingdom of God in their city and in other cities. And when you're in their auditorium, on one wall, there's a bunch of pictures of missionaries. And these aren't just missionaries that came to their church one day and gave a presentation and the church decided to support, like oftentimes happens here in the United States. These are missionaries that they have literally sent from their church. They've sent them. They're sending people from their church all around the world, and they're financially supporting them. In fact, their senior pastor and the equivalent of their associate pastor both want to be missionaries. That's how serious they are about building the kingdom of God. And I was personally challenged by that. I came back, or really spent a lot of time thinking about how I really believe our church has taken some good steps on this front over the last few years, but we've got a long way to go. I learned so much from them on that front, and that's kind of part of it for me. So one of the things that's awesome about traveling with you guys for me is that you guys kind of bring the temperament and the personality of Crossway with you. We like to laugh and have fun as a church family. And there are a lot of really fun moments, little funny moments. And I feel like I already know how this question is going to go, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Can you share a funny moment from the trip?
Chad, you want to hit us up for that?
So we're going to kick this one back to TJ because we had a lot of funny moments, but this was the most embarrassing and funniest that I in the same sense.
This is the one that throws me under the bus.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I went, part of the reason why I went on this trip is because we're in the formative phases of developing a relationship with this church, Lafay, and because of that, I wanted to go and get to know the pastor and the pastoral staff and let them get to know me so we can just start building a relationship together. And Early on when I was there, I asked the pastor, Paco, I said, look, do you think at some point while we're here, it would be possible for me to meet with you and your staff team or any of your volunteers that want to, just so I can get to know them and they can get to know me. And I told him, I said, I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to be another thing on your to-do list. I really don't want to put you out in any way. But if you're interested and open to it, I'd love to do that. And his face kind of lit up and goes, oh yes, I'll definitely try to line that up. And so initially the meeting was supposed to be at 6 on Friday, and then it became Saturday, and then it became 8 o'clock. And when I say 8, like when you give times in Mexico, it's more like ish, so 8 o'clock Mexican time means 8:30, 8:45, maybe 9:15. Like in America, when I say, hey, I'm going to be there at 8, what I mean is you can count on me there at 7:45, right? That's not the way it works there. So it's Friday and they have spent all week with us. I mean, working alongside us, 12, 14-hour days. They have their young kids there. And I got to Friday and I thought, man, they have got to be exhausted. I don't really want to continue to wear them out. Like, I don't want to be this thing that, And so I talked to the pastor and I said, hey, look, I mean, I really don't, is this going to be bad for them? And he goes, oh, no, definitely we should meet. And I said, okay. So we sat down, we started getting to know each other. And I said, hey, look, here's a little bit about me. And then I said, why don't we just go around the room? We were sitting in a big circle. And I said, why don't you just tell me your name? And can you tell me what you do here at the church? And so they started going around, and a guy named Francisco was sitting next to me, and then Carlita was a couple down, and then Maida and some others, and Pepe that I had met before. And we got mostly all the way around, and then there was a guy who I really didn't know. I'd seen him, and he goes, I said, well, can you tell me your name? He goes, Yo soy. And I said, Yo soy. That's great. Good to meet you. And he goes, he goes, no. Yo soy. And I said, yeah, like, I think I got it right. Yeah, like, yo soy. He goes, no. And people around the circle start snickering. Like, they're trying to be respectful about it, but that kind of stuff. And so the guy tries again, and he goes, yo soy Samuel. I was like, oh, Samuel's your last name? That's a weird last name, but cool, good to meet you, yo soy. And he goes, no. And at this time, everybody around the circle is just rolling. And I'm like, well, I don't know what's going on. And finally, my translator mercifully tells me, hey, in Spanish, yo soy means my name is. So I called him yo soy for the next 3 days.
I think you also called Francisco Fernando.
I kept calling him Fernando.
Yeah.
I don't know why Fernando got stuck in my head. But yeah, so there were a lot of funny moments like that, people eating spicy food. Chad and I we decided somewhere along in this trip that anything that said hot or spicy, we were going to try. And so we'd buy it from whatever store. Nothing was really spicy. Nothing was really spicy. All right, so one of the cool parts of the trip for me was that every single morning at 8 a.m., our team would get up and we would gather on this like portico patio area of the hotel that we were staying in. I think there's a picture back there. And we would all meet up together and we would have a devotional time. And, we kind of recapped the previous day, what stood out to us, where we saw God working and all that kind of stuff. And so one of the passages of scripture that we really the whole week kind of camped out on is John 20:21, where Jesus tells his disciples, it's after he's been crucified and resurrected, and the disciples are all huddled up in this room because they're scared and they think they're next. And Jesus shows up and he tells them, peace be unto you, that type of thing. And then he says this, he says, as the Father has sent me, so send I you. And we spent a lot of time that week talking about how just like the disciples are sent, every single one of us who has committed our lives to Jesus Christ, we also are sent as well. No matter where we are, we're sent. And we talked about what it looks like and why mission is important. So I guess my question to you guys is there anything that kind of stands out to you about that time that we had every single morning?
Well, when we had that time, the devotional time in the mornings, it was kind of like our pep talk for the day. It took us from being tired from the 12, 14 hours and just getting enough sleep to get by. And it's before breakfast or coffee or anything, right?
Oh, I had coffee.
Yeah.
I had coffee.
At least you got her coffee. I think Dean probably got her coffee too, but I hadn't had mine.
So I don't want to talk to some people until they've had coffee.
But it took us from that getting up in the morning time to you're ready to go and you're just energized for the day. But it also was a time because we were so scattered doing different things during the day, it was a time to like come together and hear what everybody had actually engaged in and been able to do the day before.
Yeah.
And like one of the things that we'd gotten to do, we had this electrician or electrical store that's like a half a block away from the church. And we would go there and we needed so many things. I mean, we'd come across this one thing. All right, we got to get this. Run to the store. And most of the time he'd have it. But a lot of times when he didn't, the guy there that had the store, he would send somebody out, either to somewhere else in the town to go get it or to another town away. And he said, 30 minutes. Of course, this is over Google Translate too.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, we're not speaking any Spanish here, like minutos, whatever.
We are basically communication techniques where a translator, if they were available,
or just
Google Translate or grunting.
That's it.
Grunting and pointing. Oh, wow.
But one particular time is we were just getting back from a home visit. And on the way back from the home visit, instead of going to the church, Mike and I stopped by there because we needed to get a power supply. And when we talked to him, he said, 30 minutes. I get somebody to get it. So we waited. Instead of going back to the church, we ended up getting the soda and coming back to I think it was coffee. But we ended up getting back to the store and just waiting there. I don't know, he had some stools there to sit on. So we were sitting there waiting. And there was nobody else in the store, so we started translating back and forth, talking about, he asked if I was an engineer, and asked what we did, what we were doing in Mexico and all that. And then we started telling him about La Fe, the church, and what we were doing. And he said it was a good thing that we were doing. And we went on to talk about faith. He actually brought faith into the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's the Lord, right there, opening the door. And so he opened the door. We walked through, and then we were able to invite him to church on the next day. That was a Saturday, and we were able to invite him to come to church the next day. And that was just a way that God opened the door for us. And of all the things we were able to do on that trip, like you said earlier, what if that was the point of us being there? Mm-hmm. Was just for that one moment. Wasn't for fixing the wires. It wasn't for doing all the other stuff. It wasn't for anything else. But the one thing we were there to do is to introduce that guy to the Lord.
Yeah. There's, you told that story several times, and we talked a lot about it on the trip. It made me think about, because, the language barrier is not a small obstacle. It was pretty significant the whole trip. But you were able, in spite of that major obstacle, to have a faith conversation with him. And it made me think about what different obstacles we sometimes allow to stand in the way between us and whatever faith conversation God might want us to have with somebody else. I guarantee you, probably most of the things that stand in our way aren't nearly as difficult as that language barrier was. There was this other story too where it happened to me. I ended up having, a lot of times they like to come up and try to talk to you and carry on conversation. And most of them give up kind of quickly when they realize that language barrier is so big. But there's this one kid who just wouldn't give up. And him and I ended up having a whole hour-long conversation over Google Translate. I found out he's 14 years old. He works 2 jobs. Mm-hmm. He's a baker and a carpenter. He works those 2 jobs because his daddy abandoned his family, just took off, and he's trying to help his mom take care of him and his 2 younger brothers. And he was telling me about this test he was going to take on Monday that was going to determine his future, really. It was going to determine whether he got into high school and whether he would get a job and all this kind of stuff. And somewhere in the middle of it, I kind of felt like God was kind of urging me to have a faith conversation. So I pushed into conversation about faith. And at some point in the conversation, I told him, I said, I want you to know that God has a plan and a purpose for your life. And when he read that in Spanish, he looked over at me and his eyes got big. Like that was the thought that had never occurred to him. And And he typed back, he goes, seriously, are you being serious? Does God really have a plan and a purpose for my life? And I was able to say, absolutely. I believe that with every fiber of my being. And I left that conversation thinking the same thing. What if all the reasons why I thought I were here wasn't the real reason why God put me there? What if God brought me all the way there to tell a boy that he has a plan and a purpose for his life? We miss so many opportunities, I feel like. We let obstacles get in our way, don't we? Did you guys want to add any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of tie on to that. As I spoke earlier, I felt when I was first coming to Mexico, this is what they're needing from me. And God really changed that through some of our talks up there. In fact, I'm going to prove a point here, I hope, but how many know the term koinonia?
Raise your hands, people.
If you those don't count.
Look,
They don't count.
Yeah, all the Windshape people.
all the windshakes know what it is.
So they brought up this term koinonia, and essentially what it is, and especially to the Mexican people, is a sense of fellowship and how they put fellowship on top of everything. And then TJ says, I'm telling him about this word, and he's like, bro, I've been teaching that for like 4 or 5 sermons.
We talk about it in this devotion one time. He comes up to me like, this is a revolutionary new idea. It's like, man, this koinonia thing really hit me. I was like, bro, for the last year, I've said it at least 10 to 15 times.
Well, you see how it stuck. So
They'll remember it this time.
They will remember it once. But yeah, as I kind of made my days through there, Christy, the Manna, one of our Manna leaders, she spoke about all our projects that we were doing and how grateful that the church leadership was, but that if we didn't get any of those projects done and just gain a relationship with the people, that was way more important to them than all the things we were able to accomplish. So it really changed my view about what I was there for, and it was more about the fellowship and what God was giving me instead of what I was giving them.
Right. I think, is it fair to say, guys, that if we were to summarize the trip, that we got more than we gave?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so, look, I want to kind of wrap this time up with that thought, because in the next year we're going to take another trip, likely back to Lafay. And when we do, I can guarantee for some of you, God's going to start working on your heart, almost trying to say, hey, look, and you'll feel that nudging. And what I know, as my experience as a pastor, is that almost as soon as that happens for some of you, you're going to try to start talking yourself out of it. You're going to find all kinds of reasons. Maybe it's not safe, or that's a long trip, or I don't have skills, or that's money I don't have, or a number of things. There's a language barrier. You're going to try to talk yourself out of it. And what I want to encourage you to do is listen. If they had more time to talk, they would tell you, say yes to God no matter what. You won't regret it. When God invites you on a spiritual adventure, go with him. Go with him. When I look over the course of my life, it's not the yeses I said to God that I regret. It's the no's. So when God invites you on a spiritual adventure with him, say yes, and you'd be amazed at what he'll do in your life.